This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the Maro Itoje of website builders, the world's easiest to use website builder, in fact. One undiscussed part of Lions tours is alongside carrying the mascot, the youngest lion actually has to build a website, yet thankfully, Henry Pollock very quickly found Squarespace. Able to put together a simple website in mere moments, he was able to update and compile the website over the entire tour using their blogging features to keep it updated, even adding a storefront, logging his recommendations for places to go or pulses to check over the course of the full tour. All thanks to Squarespace's easy to use, fluid features that anyone can use. And if you want to do the same and build your own beautiful website in minutes, you can head to the link in the description and use the offer code SQUIDGRUGBY to save yourself a bit of money on that website. Arguably, the biggest men's rugby event of the year takes place this Saturday. It's the first test between the British and Irish Lions and Australia. This is a game that's been built up for 12 years. Since 2013, I think a lot of Wallaby fans, a lot of Wallabies themselves, have had in the back of their mind revenge for what happened in that third test, where the Lions ran away with it in the second half, completely dominated. This is a huge and very exciting game.
Yeah, I think there's a part of me that's still haunted by that because it's very reminiscent of what happened 12 years ago. That Wallabies team, granted they did much better in the 2011 World Cup than they did in the 23 one. However, they were still quite talked down in comparison to the Lions. A lot of people said, well, they're good, but they're not going to compete with this lot. And that ended up being a 2-1 series. That the Lions had to be 10 out of 10 in that third test to put a big score on them because the Wallabies were so good in the second test and really tightened it up and frustrated the Lions and stole it at the end with Adam Ashley Cooper dropping over. So that kind of reminds me of where we are now because the Wallabies, I think, are largely being judged on their last World Cup performance. But actually, since then, under Joe Schmidt, they've got a lot better. And I think they're still widely underappreciated because they are a bloody good side.
Yeah, the Wallabies are a much better team than I think anyone's given credit for. You look at this time last year, they were being widely written off. People were saying, should we move the tour to play in France or New Zealand or somewhere? Can we arrange this last minute? And then the Wallabies come up to the UK for their tour in November, and they beat England at Twickenham. They put 50 on Wales in Cardiff. They very almost beat Ireland in Dublin. And yes, they come unstuck a little bit at Murrayfield, but they're still broadly, I think, still better than people would have expected based on the World Cup a year earlier.
Yeah.
And then you look at them slowly building into this comprehensive team, and a lot of people are bringing up what happened against Fiji a couple of weeks ago in their one and only warm-up game for this tour, where it took a late try to win very narrowly over a Fijian team, and yet I don't think that is representative of who the Australia team is. Because if you look at the actual performance, right, and it's a warm-up game, ultimately, yes, the result always matters because it's international rugby, it's test rugby, you are awarding caps for this. Ultimately, right, this was a warm-up, and what matters is the performance. And in the first half in particular, Australia kind of blew Fiji away, just they only scored 14 points as a result.
Yeah, you look at the short carries that were being made by Australia, they were generally making yards off those. And a lot of the time, the moves they were trying to pull out were effective. It was just they were quite unlucky that the last pass would go forward. They had 2 tries disallowed for forward passes in that first half alone. And you look at the tries they concede as well. Not many teams in international rugby, including the British and Irish Lions, would score these tries. You're looking at Huita Wainingolo running 50-odd metres here. The Lions don't have him.
He might be the form player on the planet right now.
Yeah.
He's been ridiculous over this summer.
He has.
So he's been absurd. The try they scored on half-time Fiji was sort of nonsense. Australia take a silly decision that they would never make in this Lions test of not kicking the ball out on half-time right after they score. A lot of the tries a really speculative chip because they feel so comfortable because they've been so on top, and yet they've only scored 14 points. They take a gamble that probably wouldn't be on. They wouldn't go for otherwise. They won't go in a test this big as this Lions test. And Fiji it. They
Once
run it
again,
the
it's Wainingolo who
Yeah.
offloads to Rayasi to score that try.
Yeah.
And it is pure bullshit. And that is not a weapon that the Lions have here. It's a weapon, you could argue, only Fiji have.
Yeah.
That they are the team in World Rugby who punish teams like this. And now, at the same time,
team have won in goal, though.
Yeah, you make a good point that you would like to think, from a Wallaby perspective, they wouldn't do that against the Lions. If they were 14-0 up on their own 10-metre line, Tate McDermott or any scrum half, any fly half playing for them would just turn and say, lads, let's get in the sheds, you know? But yeah, as I say...
Especially now that it's happened.
Yeah, exactly.
You saw Tate McDermott immediately afterwards. He was just so, like, he knew that was on him.
He was
He knew that
embarrassed.
was his decision. Yeah.
which is
And
rare for Tate McDermott.
he won't do that again.
No. As a man who loves taking risks and seeing what happens from them, he knew
He saw the consequence
he'd
there.
screw it up. Yeah, 100%. But yeah, as I say, a lot of the actual shapes and what Australia were trying to do were really, really effective in that game.
Yeah, and I think that's what you need to come back to is the details of the performance rather than the outcome. And actually, Australia repeatedly got on the front foot. They were using their carries incredibly smartly, something we've seen a lot from Australia and the Lions do as well. Both teams have been doing this, right? And I think something interesting about this game, I expect it to be fairly open because both teams are very good at artificially creating go forward, right? So we saw Australia a few times over that Fiji test do exactly this. So they hit up, they used Jorgensen on a short carry off the scrum and immediately go back to the blind side because the Fijian forwards here are still getting into position. They're still retreating from having scrummaged. And it allows them to just get some go forward ball and they keep playing and they almost generate a try scoring opportunity with this. They make some really good ground ultimately off this. But it's through just knowing where players are going to be and hitting back there and anticipating spaces where you can make good carries. Something the Lions are very good at is splitting that off, and Farrell loves this with Ireland as well, using short sides in order to generate momentum. Of going, they're splitting the defence off, their line speed is going to be slow on the short side, so let's hit up there. Both teams are very smart in terms of how they bring these players onto the ball. You then look at the eventual try scored by Fraser McWright, and this is another way in which Australia like to generate that go forward, like to build through this, right? So it is a short, standard pod carry, free forward, setting an arrowhead, sort of thing we see all the time. Loliseo calls here whilst he sets wider. He readies the backs out wide. And Australia, instead of just taking the carry, all three players end up receiving the ball in this pod, right? We have one tips the other, and then they offload to Jeremy Williams, who makes the eventual carry, takes contact, gets to ground. By this point, they've made it 5 metres past the gain line. Fiji are retreating, at which point the backline is already set up because Loliseo was already thinking one phase in advance, and they go wide.
And critically as well, in the breakdown, they've generated enough momentum that Gleeson's the only man who needs to hit this.
Yeah.
So they're one man over, really clean presentation for McDermott to play away.
Yeah.
And from there, it's super, super clean. They go for a 3-3-1-1 formation. At this point, it's obvious that Loliseo wants to play to the open side. So with that in mind, there's no real point having an edge forward on the blind side here.
Yeah.
So instead, they swing round. James Slipper, who's been in this Wallaby team for about 52 years at this point, he's played every role there is to play. And he runs his line superbly.
If he gets any older, he will be playing in slippers rather than boots.
Yes, indeed, indeed. And yeah, he runs his line superbly here, and they end up going out of the back. And the one thing I really want to look out for here is the line of Joseph Akuso Sua'ali'i, because he is so late to hit this that Fiji have enough to worry about with this structure, with how wide Australia are, with how quickly they're getting the ball in and out of their hands. To say they quite like to play quite flat, Australia, but they challenge themselves on the line to make lots of passes in a short space. And Sua'ali'i hits the line so late, and it's a really rare skill in rugby to be able to hit a hard line and whilst you're being nailed, catch the ball and lift it off you like that. And Sua'ali'i does such a good job of that to McWright, who is the extra edge forward, the actual edge forward.
Yeah, who then runs it in from there. He has the option to fix and give. He doesn't want it. He wants to score himself.
He wants to run into somebody.
It's really well taken. However, the way they're using Sua'ali'i is really intelligent, both in terms of the obvious strengths that he has as a ball carrier, as a player, as his ability to step, and obviously his ability to the high ball, which will, I think, become very relevant as we get into this game. But also those lines of running and the subtlety of him and the way he glides over the ground, right? And obviously you want of the ball in his hands, but he's so good then at changing dummy lines. And you think of a lot of great dummy runners, people like Lene Kitau in that Australian team, are guys who are very obvious and run great lines that opposition are drawn to. Sua'ali'i is so good at running lines that nobody notices, at ghosting into places. So you look at this, right? He starts in the boot, and you think he's the guy playing out the back, he's a distributor, going to bring the wider players, you've got both wingers linked up on this side, into the game. However, last second, Loliseo doubles round, gets into the boot himself, and Sua'ali'i just floats out and creates an extra man, creates an extra number. Suddenly, Fiji are man short on this side out of nowhere because of the subtlety of his line. Eventually, kick goes through, Jorgensen scores it, it's called back for an offside, but this is so tight to creating a try through his subtle line of running.
It's so discreet, isn't it? If you're Mangala here in D for Fiji, you're looking up and you're going, I've got Sua'ali'i.
Yeah.
And then instead, you're right, Loloseo comes around, it's a bit of a cliche, but creates that extra man. But it only works because of Sua'ali'i changing his channel to mark himself up against Wainingolo on the wing.
Yeah.
It's superb.
Critical thing here as well, right, is out wide on the wings, Fiji defend quite similar to the Lions.
Yeah.
So this sort of thing is possible. Like, that's the sort of same position that you want a Freeman or a Lowe in.
Especially with the Sua'ali'i, because he's not somebody that you can just always double job on because he's such a strong carrier. You look at, for instance, this try that he scores for the Waratahs on first phase. He's playing fullback here and they bring him in on the short line off a dummy maul and he crashes through 2 men to score this. His upper body strength is ridiculous, and when he's running these lines and they are dummy lines, you have to treat them properly. You have to take them seriously or else he will take weak shoulders, and his offloading game is the thing that everybody knows about.
Yeah, however, there is one big change in this Wallaby team, which is Noah Loloseo picked up an injury, sprinting for the try line, pulled up, injured, was stretched it off.
It's horrible.
Horrible looking injury.
Yeah.
I really hope he's okay. But this leaves Australia in quite a pickle because since Schmidt came in, he was very clear, right? I'm here for the Lions tour, I'm leaving afterwards, and Loloseo is my 10. Two pieces of information you're kind of given early on, right? And he kept backing Loloseo even when he had like weaker performances. And then once you got into the autumn, he was superb. And we saw with it how their 10 plays changed slightly.
Yeah, he quite likes the 10 to almost just be a rugby player in a way. Obviously, things go through the 10. The 10 is the main organiser of things. However, Loloseo in particular is quite happy to be overruled and to just slot into different positions. And I do think it does work with the other 10s that we'll see in this test series, that Ben Donaldson is a really versatile player. He plays as 12, as 15 as well. And that works with the way Loloseo, he's happy to run a short line. He's happy to stand on the wing or stand out the way and let Karevi or let Tom Wright do a little bit more organisation. You've got Tom Liner as well, who's a 10 whose skill set really just suits an entire back line, you know, and he's a strong enough player as well that he's really comfortable in the contact areas. You've got James O'Connor as well, who's played everywhere in the back line. That there are the sort of players who can slot in throughout this test series that are versatile and will let other people plan things around them.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, isn't it, right? That I think 10 in this Joe Smith system is kind of a communal position that everyone is kind of playing it, right? And so you've seen the likes of Tom Wright slotting in there. You've seen Sua'ali'i. You've seen, you know, Karevi and all this Ikitau, all the centre options.
You even saw, for the Jorgensen winning try against England, Fraser McWright steps in a boot.
Yeah, and we've seen Jorgensen himself. Like, we've seen everyone kind of slot in and act as a playmaker, and it allows Loloseo to, one, his kind of role, right? One is to be a more active rugby player and just kind of think, and if he wants to pick a line himself, he can do that. But the other thing is, he is the primary kicker. And everything in terms of attack management and passing and distributing is split amongst the entire back line, and occasionally forwards fill in, occasionally McWright or Wilson, but pretty much the back line. However, he is the guy managing the kicking game, right? So that is going to be the job suddenly dropped onto someone else's shoulders. And Loloseo's got so much better at that over the last year. And I think he is a significant loss, but I don't think he's one the Wallabies will be too haunted by. I think they can very easily replace Loloseo and still be just as effective. You've got a couple of players there, as you mentioned, a couple of options who are all equally efficient and equally good.
100%. I think Loloseo is the standout player, you know, or certainly in terms of the Schmidt system. He's clearly the one that he wants to lean on, but I don't think they're going to rip up the playbook as a means of this. They are still going to do that thing where they stand really flat to the line and they like to change the picture and run those. We did this in the previous video we did about Australia. We talked about this, the triangles that it likes to run in terms of going short at the line and flipping it out the back and then just have loads of people running in different directions off each other. This example here is a really good one. They start so close to the line and they get 6 passes strung together in really short proximity. It's quite risky because in this case, Fiji fly off the line and they manage to catch it behind the gain line. Australia have a hard time reloading, getting all the way back on side because Fiji done such a good job defending it, and McDermott gets caught in possession, ends up dropping the ball. So there are two sides to this because it's clearly a deliberately high-risk attack where the whole point is that it's very last minute, it's very sudden. But again, on the flip side of that, it's quite hard to defend if the Wallabies almost don't know what they're doing themselves.
Yeah. We always think of Joe Schmidt as a very risk-averse coach, which he was with Leinster, he was with Ireland, that he didn't like offloads, he didn't like going within, touching distance of the touchline. He liked you to weigh up the risk and think about it from a percentage point of view. I think he's kind of still doing that, but he's changed how he's approaching that with Australia because they try to pass out of trouble an awful lot. And if someone finds themselves in difficult spot, if they're being blitzed, they will throw an extra pass no matter what. They'll try and get the ball to width rather than going, okay, the safest option is to take the tackle and recycle it, right? Instead, they go, no, let's try, maybe the safest thing is to give it to someone else who can then stop, weigh up an option, wait, even if we're going to lose more ground there. I feel like he's changed it to be much more pass heavy. The average number of passes in an international rugby match at the minute is about 230 over a game. I think we're going to see something higher than that between the two teams. I think we've got two teams who love to pass the ball because if you look at the Lions, if we move on a little bit, this is likewise a team who have been passing the ball a lot, and it has been very much Andy Farrell's structure.
Yeah, and that's it. I think what I was just saying about ripping up the playbook from Australia perspective, I think almost the opposite applies in a Lions perspective because they have such a wide playbook for a team that's only been together about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And you can imagine they'll be really unafraid to just change what they're doing on the fly. So the Lions so far in this tour have alternated what structure they play, basically depending where they are, not who they have. It's not personnel based at all, but they alternate between a 1-3-3-1, which is the most kind of standard structure. It's obviously symmetrical and it's really easy as a fly half to play behind.
Yeah.
They've alternated between that and 1-3-2-2, which is more centred around getting lots of passes in, getting lots of offloads in, and having forwards who run lines off each other.
As a basic outline, right, the 1-3-3-1 just means that you've got two groups of forwards in the middle and you keep edge forwards on the wing.
Yeah.
So you've always got someone out wide.
In theory, it keeps energy the best. Yeah. That is the main theory behind it.
That's what it does. Yeah. But also, with Farrell's system, it allows you to set faster. Yeah. It is the quickest you can get into position there. It's really easy to set. Where 1-3-2-2 requires a bit more energy. It was something kind of pioneered by Japan around the 2019 World Cup to get your best carriers into wider positions. And we've seen a little bit of that, but largely I think they have been looking at 1-3-3-1 more often. Yeah,
there's a greater margin for error on 1-3-2-2 as well.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you have to second guess whether you're the 1, the 3, the 2 or the 2.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always slot seamlessly into place. However, that's not necessarily a bad thing for the Lions because you're looking at this growing partnership between Jamison Gibson-Park and Finn Russell.
Yes.
And what I really like about that is Finn Russell is really willing to change where he stands as a 10. It's very different from how he plays with Scotland. With Scotland,
or with Bath.
Or with Bath. With Scotland, he sits not really flat to the line, but not really deep. He's kind of in a standard-ish 10 position in depth-wise. Or he likes to sit in behind his centres and get the ball in the boot of those. However, here, he is really willing to just let Gibson-Park riff. And Gibson-Park, when he plays with Leinster and Ireland, he likes to sometimes just throw long balls straight to James Lowe or to Dan Sheehan on the wings and go off script in a different sense to what I was on about earlier. And from there on out, the 10 can be a bit more patient and reorganise something from an edge. However, with this, the Olive Chatham try against the Brumbies that we talked about before, Russell stands about 3 men wider than he would, 3 channels wider than he normally would playing outside of Ben White, and lets Gibson-Park's pass do the work on this. And with that in mind, if the Lions end up going off script or somebody screws up their line in a 1-3-2-2, I honestly think this is a get out of jail free card a little bit because Gibson-Park could just whip the ball miles over. And Finn Russell is always scanning and always finding different gaps in a defensive line.
Yeah.
Because often he's finding gaps that other people are meant to run into when he plays for Scotland or Bath.
We've got another angle on this, though, which is the kicking game.
Yes.
Because I've got a theory. I don't think the Lions have kicked at all how they intend to kick in the tests.
Okay.
I think we're going to see something very different.
Yeah.
Which broadly the Lions have kicked almost entirely contestably over all, 6 games so far? They have been hanging it in the air, often off 9, but sometimes off 10, and it's pretty much entirely been, bam, get a winger under it, contest. One thing we have seen a lot, and this is interesting because we haven't really seen it follow through even once, is them using a flanker as a kick chase, right? So we see Tom Curry out there a lot, we see Van der Fleer, we've seen Jack Morgan a few times, out there on the width, but we've never seen them really go hard at the breakdown. but they're setting into these positions. So I think the Lions are going to adjust how they kick. And I think there's two ways to do this. One is we've barely seen the James Lowe boot.
Yeah.
He's
They've
found
not
himself in the
used it yet.
backfield a few times, but otherwise we haven't seen them utilise his massive left foot to try and like thump it long.
We literally eyed this up as that's the reason why he was in the Lions squad in the first place. It's because of that left boot clearance option off structured play. Like Andy Farrell uses as an exit for Ireland every week.
Yeah.
And when James Lowe's unavailable, he will usually put a different left footer on the left wing.
Yeah.
Or just somewhere in the back line so they can use this. We've not seen it yet at all on the Lions tour.
Yeah.
And you would imagine that clearance for length, they have to use it.
So I think they're sitting on a longer kicking game. I think they're sitting on using that.
It's what Finn Russell prefers when he plays for Scotland or Bath.
You're looking at Finn Russell slapping it long down the middle. You're looking at James Lowe slapping it long down the wing and looking for potentially 50-22s as well. And then you're also potentially looking at the kicks off 9 off Jameson Gibson Park going slightly longer, right? And something we might be seeing, if we're seeing these flankers setting into kick chase positions but not being used there, are we going to see the Lions kick off 9 slightly longer? See Jameson Gibson Park hang it slightly further. So instead of kicking to here, they're kicking to here, right? And Freeman, say, can still get there, but instead of being able to get up in the air, he's just going in and bam, smashing them so that a flank can get over the ball and try to steal it back. It's something we saw Tom Curry do extremely well on the last tour. Is this a strategy they're going to lean on, of kicking slightly further in all regards in order to challenge Australia? Not in the air, but push them back.
I think so, because Gibson Park, you can make it semi-contestable, the kicks that he goes for, and the other two lads that we mentioned can send it long. As you say, two wingers who are great on kick chase, and the whole Lions back 5 are jackal threats. People who can get over the ball and make it really difficult. It's not just in the air that you have a chance of competing to the ball. It is the breakdown and also your line speed off the back of that.
Yeah.
It's putting Australia in a really sticky situation back there.
Yeah, so I think we're going to see the Lions kick much more than they have over the rest of the tour.
Agreed.
However, I still think we're going to see something that resembles the kind of wider and a lot of passing movement that we have seen once they get around halfway.
Yeah.
I think they'll play much less than their own half, even with Finn Russell at 10.
I think the kicking game is largely to create unstructured scenarios where they can,
Yeah.
play these funny shapes off the back of it.
Yeah, we've seen them tighten it up a bit against the Brumbies. They played much tighter than they did on the rest of the tour, where they were much more... I think we're looking at something similar to 4 years ago, when the Lions played very expansive over the tour, and then once we got into the test, they tightened it up an awful lot, and they just kicked everything, and they barely played any rugby. And I think we're looking at something reasonably similar, but nowhere near as extreme. I don't think Farrell would enjoy that, and he wouldn't want his team playing
You're saying
that
by
way.
test 3 they're going to call up Dan Bigger?
Yeah, I hope so. Ronan Lagarde himself, with his boots on, those two are going to compete
fighting
for
for the 10
jersey.
shirt,
Yeah.
literally.
So I think we're going to see the Lions kick more. I think we're going to see them play a bit more direct, but they're still going to be playing broadly expansive rugby.
Yeah.
I think they've probably also been working on some set moves that they're holding back for this tour. We have seen a lot of times they have run very simple, like almost hands down the line passages.
Yeah. It makes me think that regardless of how kick heavy or run heavy it is, it's going to be a really fast-paced game. I feel like the ball in play is going to be through the roof.
Yeah, I think you've got two sets of coaches here who have embraced the fact that attacking rugby's got on top of defensive rugby and kicking rugby over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And we are seeing more and more points scored, more and more tries scored than ever before. I think this has the opportunity to be a game with a lot of tries in it. I think we're looking at like quite a few being scored. I was going to say a number there, but then you can only ever be wrong if I say I think it's going to be 5 or 6 tries at least.
So I won't make a score prediction myself. However, Wally has been really, really keen to drop his score prediction in here. It's going to be 100 points to 5, mate.
Okay, to whom?
Australia.
Where are the Lions' 5 points going to come from?
An Australian.
Yeah, Sione?
Yeah.
Okay, and Die the Dragon, what do you have to say? He's too used to losing. He thinks it's going to be a Wallabies win.